Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Bwtm Sports, the great debate. Will it be a great debate? We're still waiting to find out. Bo Bland from Truth and Facts About Boxing is a no-show at the moment. Spencer Ferron is a no-show at the moment. Mike from Pound for Pound Boxing is a no-show at the moment. So we will give Bo a 5 to 7 minute space. So we're going to give him till midnight. We'll give him till midnight, and if he doesn't turn in by midnight, then there will be a default win for Eugene. But nonetheless, we have people in the room. First of all, good evening to our guest moderator tonight, Gail Falkenthal. Gail, how are we doing?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Doing well, but unfortunately, it appears my job is going to be much easier than anticipated.
And we have also in the room one side of the debate, Team Lomachenko, Eugene.
So, Bo tweeted me a picture of a lion with a crown and be like, oh, I'm gonna scold you or whatever. But it seems like lion is dead and the crown is from Burger King. So.
Eugene, I smell perhaps some kind of Cuban authoritarian conspiracy on our hands. Perhaps. I have no facts to back that up, only reasonable suspicion that they are all missing, all of them together missing from this debate.
For me, the other day, our man Bwtm's Eugene is here at hand. I made sure that I had nothing to do with the event tonight. That's why we brought you in tonight, Gail, to moderate the event. So if Mr. Bland doesn't turn up by midnight, then we will continue the show regardless. We'll just have to say that Eugene wins the fight, wins this debate by default, which is a shame, really, because I was looking forward to hearing what Bo had to say for himself. But in the time being, what we can do is talk a little bit to Gail. So, Gail, for people who don't know who you are, tell the world a little bit about who you are.
Well, I will do that to buy some time. I'm based in San Diego, California, which is where I am a third-generation native. So grew up right along the Mexican border. And because of my exposure to boxing on both sides of the border, have been a fan for many years. Spent the first half of my career as a journalist, as a broadcaster, although at that time, women were not exactly welcomed into sports journalism, much less boxing journalism. So I carried on, switched my career to the public relations side of things, and now have a public relations consulting firm out of San Diego, but had the opportunity to return to journalism on the side and do what I couldn't do when I was 20 years old, which is cover boxing for a living. So I write for Communities Digital News, which is a website based out of Washington, D.C., which is actually a general interest news site. So I write not only for the fans and knowledgeable people in the boxing industry, such as yourselves, but I write for the general fan to get them interested in boxing. So that is my goal in life. And look who the cat dragged in.
The debate is on. Bo Bland is in the room.
In the house. Account for yourself.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I am in the house. So you guys might hear a little noise and stuff because I'm still at work, but I am a man of my word, and I always make sure that stays intact.
Your truth and your sketchy Cuban facts will come in loud and clear. You sound just fine.
Well, notice you said sketchy Cuban facts, so that's cool.
Sketchy.
Right.
I don't know about that.
I know the ones that are sketchy.
But we hear you loud and clear. We don't want any misunderstandings on this debate.
Yes.
So I
Okay.
have just introduced myself and my background. Why don't you introduce yourself and your background, Bo, and then we will have Eugene do the same, and then we will get it on.
All right. Bo, truth and facts about boxing. Association with Three Kings brought to you by the movement. I fought in the amateurs. I've competed. Grew up in Chicago, west side of Chicago. Very cultured. My family background. I do have some Cuban background in my family. Henceforth, why my passion and my defense, I guess I might say, and my sketchy Cuban accent. But I grew up watching boxing. Oh man, I watched boxing since I was
Oh,
5 years old.
you're very sketchy. You're sounding very sketchy. Nobody can hear what you're saying.
Okay, I said I've been watching boxing. Hello?
Yes, Bob, go ahead.
No, I said, is this better?
Yeah, that's better. Go ahead.
Okay, I just took the earpiece off. Been watching boxing since I was about 5 years old. So I started watching boxing maybe late 70s. Fell in love with it ever since. And my mom didn't actually want me to participate in boxing. And when she realized it wouldn't go away, then she decided to teach me. And then that's when I found out that boxing was actually a part of my family. My grandfather fought in the military. One of my uncles was like a kickboxer rope champion. And so my mom taught me how to fight. And man, I just been doing it. Met a guy by the name of BJ, started talking to him, did a couple live podcasts, and then decided to do my own. Started my own, and then met Mike from Pound for Pound, and Ingram Jones, and Gail, who's our moderator, to where Eugene, and here I am where I am today because of you guys, and I greatly appreciate it. Hello?
And we thank you. Eugene, let's hear the same from you. A little bit of your background.
All right. So originally made in Ukraine. Started following boxing. Like the first fight that I watched from the beginning to the end was in about 2010, which for you may sound like not so long ago, but at the time I was 14, and that was Vitaly Klitschko versus Let's Go champ Shannon Briggs. And since then, I started getting more and more into boxing because there is a big culture of appreciation of athletes in Ukraine, you know, especially those that are fighting on top level. So at some point, I gathered enough information that I couldn't see anywhere in English-speaking sources. So I reached out to Ingram at Bwtm Sports because I felt like the guys from Eastern Europe should have their stories heard, even if not from them, but then indirectly through me. And started covering at first Osik and Lomachenko, and then I broadened I started learning about more guys, and at this point it's just whenever information that is that I cannot find in English, that is from Eastern Europe, about somebody interesting that people should see and see them fighting, I just toss it towards Ingram, and I hope that the audience appreciates it because those guys are showing some decent skill.
Outstanding. So we have two extremely qualified debaters here today. One to take up the cause of one Guillermo Rigondeaux or Rigondeaux, and Bull, which do you prefer? Which is the proper pronunciation, or do we just go with Rigo?
just go with Rigo, but it's actually Rigondeaux. But just go with Rigo.
Rigondeaux. Perfect. And Bo representing on that side, Eugene representing on the side of, obviously, Vasily Lomachenko. So we've got the Rigo versus Loma debate in advance of a short 72 hours from now, a much anticipated fight between these two men with outstanding amateur careers, including 2 Olympic gold medals on each side, outstanding professional careers as well, a showdown that's been discussed virtually ever since the two of them ended up in the professional ranks together. So why don't we let you both make just an opening salvo, if you will, an opening statement of your intentions toward each other. Brief, because we'll get into the details here over the next half hour, 45 minutes or so. But consider this your opening statement, your opening shot across the bow. And by a virtual coin toss, we will let you go first, Bo.
Okay, my opening statement is this. Rigondeaux is a very supremely skilled fighter. He's a very highly accomplished amateur fighter as well as highly accomplished professional fighter. He has extremely high, very good ring IQ. Now, he exemplifies everything there is to exemplify about Cuban boxing and the Cuban school of boxing. He stays within himself. He doesn't get outside of himself. He has faced high level of competition. Even if you take out Nonito Donaire, he faced Ricardo Cordoba, who was a former champion, ranked number 5. Ed Becco, who was a former champion. Jason Cassidy, who was ranked number 10. Tian Kennedy, who was ranked number 3. Then Rico Ramos, who was an undefeated champion at that time. And of course, we all know about Nonito Donaire. But then Rigo is also undefeated, meaning that there's no style that you can think of that you can say that can beat him, because he has not been beaten. So when my intentions is just to prove to people why is it that I feel that Rigo is going to win, and also to make people also understand that the weight and age won't be a factor because of Rigo's ring IQ, his skill, and his overall ability. So those are my intentions today. And on top of that, also hope some people take from this something that they've learned. You've learned something, whether you learned something more about boxing or whether you feel like, we can do these debates again, but just take from the sport what I love about the sport, what I love about what we're seeing, and why this weekend is so important, because these are 2 highly skilled fighters, highly Olympic accomplished fighters. We would probably never see this again in a very long time. This is something special, hence why it has sold out from a guy that people say that can't do fights. This fight sold out. This fight is highly anticipated because people know what they're seeing. Real recognizes real.
And Eugene.
All right. What's up, everybody? This is not Bo from Untruth and Accidental Truth Facts About Boxing. I'm gonna be Bo's alter ego today, and I'm gonna be building a case why I think he chose the wrong guy to win this fight. So overall, the biggest, I guess, the biggest advantage that Rigo has to offer against Lomachenko has never been proven in 130 pounds. However, though, I must say that he has always been fighting against guys who are way heavier than him. So what I would suggest is that his punching power will not be enough for a guy like Lomachenko, and that he never faced a guy that fights in a style as Lomachenko. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that Lomachenko's chin hasn't been really tested. However, we already know that Rigo cannot take a punch even from not a killer. So that's going to be a point in his bane as well. Hello?
And is that your conclusion?
My conclusion is a win by unanimous decision.
And Bo, what's your conclusion of the fight? You might as well get that prediction right out of the way.
Oh, Rigo. I think I got Rigo all day and any day, 3 times on Sunday. And let me just say, there's nothing like the original, the real McCoy, not fake.
And are you saying this will be by decision or by stoppage?
I'm going to say it's going to be by decision.
So that's something where we both have some agreement that this fight is going the distance. Why do you think it's going to be a full 12-round fight on Saturday? And will there be any knockdowns along the way?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. No, you know what? I'm the Bwtm undisputed champion. I'll give the challenger a chance to plead his case before I put him in the doghouse.
All right, the gauntlet is thrown, Eugene. Pick that thing up off the floor.
All right. So it goes the distance. First of all, because I don't believe that Rigo's punching power will transition to 130 as well as it is playing in 122. I think he'll have a different opponent who can chin him within the fight, so he will be more cautious about it. And the sheer output and volume of work that Lomachenko performs in the ring and pace that he dictates is gonna be the final final answer to winning Rigondeaux.
All right, Bo.
Well, it's going to go to distance because of a couple reasons. It's going to go to distance because of Rigo's defensive ability. Here's the thing. Rigo doesn't have to hit hard enough to knock Lomachenko out. He just has to hit enough to put something on Lomachenko's mind. There are 3 levels of punching power in boxing. There's the, okay, give you something to think about. Then there's the, I don't want that anymore. Then there's the elite level, which is 1 punch knocks you out. Neither one of these guys possess the whole 1 punch knock you out. Rigo just hits hard. He's very precise and accurate. So his punches hurt more and they cause him more damage. And that's one of the things that Lomachenko is going to worry about. He knows he's going to be in there with a guy that, from an athletic standpoint, that can keep up with him step for step, but also from a standpoint of his ring IQ, is enough to make Lomachenko hesitant. His defense, which is the thing about Lomachenko, is, and I referenced the Orlando Salido fight, his defense is enough to where he can stay in the pocket that will force a guy like Lomachenko, who likes to come forward, to have arm distance, may have to take steps back. Rigo is the kind of guy that can do it. He can stay in the pocket. And Rigo has a 3-inch arm reach advantage. This is something that Lomachenko will have to deal with a guy that know how to use that advantage along with his feints. He gives awesome feints that make you think. So it's going to go the distance because of those factors right there. And I think neither man is going to try to jump on the other man because both these guys know one thing. The first guy to make a mistake can be capitalized on.
It's true, of course, undeniable by both sides, I'm sure. These gentlemen have outstanding amateur careers, beyond what the vast majority of amateurs in boxing history have ever been able to accomplish. We're getting to see that in the ring together. This is not an amateur fight. They're fighting a professional fight. So both of you, which one of you can make the case for which of your fighters has made the better transition to the professional ranks? Is it Rigo or is it Loma? Bo, make your case.
Most definitely the guy that made the transition to the professional ranks better is Rigo. Why? Well, because he hasn't taken a loss. That's the very main reason right there. That's the
Bo, you're breaking up. Bo, you'll have to start again. You're breaking up. No, not properly. No, you're underwater.
What about now?
Perfect.
Okay. Let me say, Rigo made the better transition to the pros because simply he hasn't taken a loss. That's the very #1 reason right there. And when you look at fights, I go to Ricardo Cordoba, which was a tough fight. Rigo made the adjustments he needed to make when facing Ricardo Cordoba. Lomachenko was not able to make those adjustments until later in his fight with Orlando Salido. Because why? Lomachenko at that particular time was relying strictly off his athleticism and pure ability, as to where Rigo uses ring IQ. Then you look at the level of opponents Rigo faced. Like I said, undefeated. Something Lomachenko's never done. Faced an undefeated champion in Rico Ramos. He defeated Rico Ramos. Also, the quality of champions he defeated. Rico Ramos, again, being undefeated, had some couple of title defenses, then Rigo beat him. Then, of course, Nonito Donaire. As to where if I look at Lomachenko, he beat Rocky Martinez, who already had losses by top-level guys, and he fought for a vacant title against Gary Russell, who had questionable competition. All right, so Rigo, in my opinion, if you factor in, again, with Abeco, Tion Kennedy, then he fought a guy by the name of Robert Moroccan, who was considered at that time a very good skill fighter, and Rigo made him kind of look kind of bad and look kind of slow. And then Nonito Donaire. So it trumps Lomachenko's transition. Lomachenko fought a Jason Sosa that was really getting beat by Javier Fortuna until the knockout, and he struggled against Steve Smith. Then, of course, we all know that Nicholas Walters hadn't fought in a year. So if Rigo made the better transition, hands down. It's not to say that Lomachenko hasn't done his thing. He has. But if I look at the transition, Rigo doesn't have a loss, and he's faced former champions, undefeated champions. Lomachenko suffered a loss and had to rebuild his track back up.
Eugene, how much does that loss factor in, and how well do you think Lomachenko has made that transition to the professional ranks?
I think he made a better transition because from the challenge he was willing to accept in the second fight, we can see that his confidence level was quite high and his performance was quite good. There were a lot of things about Salido fight that weren't pretty, but you know, Lomachenko never complained about it. He took his L, and from then on, we never saw anyone using that blueprint, if you want, to beat Lomachenko, simply because they couldn't apply it anymore. Because once you show a fighter vulnerable, then it's a blueprint to beat him. And if you don't use it, it means that you just can't. What tells me about what I think Lomachenko changed from his Salido fight is that he stressed more on his movement that will not allow other fighters to land any significant shots that would make Lomachenko feel uncomfortable. The only, I would say, the only damage that he took was recently when he got a headbutt with Mariaga, and that resulted in a cut, but that didn't play any particular role in the fight. So there it is.
And we'll pause just a moment because, Ingram, we have another participant in the debate in the room.
Do we? We do?
We do.
Ah, Mr. Pound for Pound Boxing. Michael, how are you doing?
What's going on? What's going on? I'm so sorry. I thought it was 6:30 Central Time instead of Eastern Time. My apologies for coming on so late.
You're in the heart of it, Michael. We're glad to see you here.
Great.
Our gentlemen have made their opening remarks. We've been comparing straight up across the board various aspects of these two. Just talked about the transition from amateur ranks to pro ranks and who's done it better. Both of our participants see this fight going the distance for different reasons, which leads me to a toss-up question, which I'm going to put out for anyone that wants to jump on it. We've talked about it going the distance. So how much or how little is power going to be a factor in this fight? Is it a factor whatsoever in this fight? And that is for anybody to jump in Or if not, we will move on.
Okay,
I got it.
I'll jump
Go
in.
ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mike.
No, I'll just come in as a moderator, but I had a question. But go ahead and answer the question, Bo.
Okay, you said, will power be a factor in this fight? Here's the funny thing about that. I think it's going to be hard to tell if power is going to be a huge factor in this fight, as far as well as because it can be a factor depending on who makes the mistake and who makes the biggest mistake that somebody can capitalize on. Then power can become a factor because Lomachenko, being the bigger person, just throws volume punches, and as we all know, volume punches when thrown accurately can hurt. Rigo, being the smaller guy, just has to throw very accurate punches, precision, precise, accurate punches, and those punches can also hurt. But the only reason why, to me, power might not play that big of a deal because neither guy sits down on their punches to the point where that one punch is enough to try to hurt you. It's just enough to try to catch your attention because they like to get in and get out. They're both counter punches, so they don't sit down on their punches for a return fire. So it won't be as big as a factor as some might think. And also, I think that, but it can play a factor as far as the body shots, which is something I'm looking forward to seeing if Rico can apply in that situation.
Eugene, anything to add?
I would say that power will be a factor, however, not a knocking out factor, because obviously any good landed shot will make another fighter feel uncomfortable and reconsider his strategy, because basically if you let Lomachenko do his combinations, then he's gonna wear you down, where if Rigondeaux catches in one of those combination, catches Lomachenko with a good hand, that's gonna make Lomachenko start trying something new, because obviously, even though his chin is pretty good and has been so far, I don't think he will risk it that much, and I think we'll see him changing certain things. Thinking about body shots, I don't think it's gonna go that way, because basically what many were saying, that Salido landed a lot of body shots and they were hurting Lomachenko. Well, I have a little upper hand here, the fact that I speak both Ukrainian and Russian. And when people were mentioning body shots, Lomachenko was returning to his corner talking to his dad that no, they were actually my balls. So, you know, there are different kind of parts of body and they hurt differently. And I don't think Salido did that much of a great job working his body.
Michael, I'm going to toss it to my co-moderator. I know you've got a burning question.
Okay, the fascinating thing about this fight is the high level of skill. Who do you think will have the biggest adjustment? The thing that makes Lomachenko so special to me, the way he fights when it comes to how he moves, the way he uses his, not just his foot in terms of footwork, but his upper body movement, the way he uses his feet, the way he uses his body positioning to set guys up. Conversely, Rigo, he does some things from not just an offensive perspective, but his defensive perspective, extremely hard to hit. So to those who are either Team Rigo or Team Loma, who do you think will have to make the biggest adjustment who do you think will have to make the biggest adjustment, if you will, in order to be effective?
I can answer that. So I think we'll see more adjustment from Rigondeaux, because Lomachenko will be the aggressor, and we'll be seeing him trying different things, maybe to surprise Lomachenko, maybe to reconsider certain things. But I think Lomachenko will have the least adjustments to it. He's basically going to bring his speed his movement, and if certain certain ways of approaching his combinations will not work, I think he will reconsider them, but very slightly. I don't think we'll see something completely different in his game plan.
Okay, I disagree. Lomachenko's going to have to make the biggest adjustment. Here's the reason why. You look at the level of opponents that Rigo has been in with. He has been in with some guys who are athletic. He has been in with some guys who are taller than him. He has been in with some guys that where he's had a reach disadvantage. I take Amagaja. He had to make an adjustment. He got knocked down twice. He made the adjustment. I even take Ricardo Cordoba. Again, taller guy. He had to make
Bo,
some adjustments.
Bo, you need to make an adjustment of your microphone. Nobody can hear what you're saying.
Can you hear me now?
Beautiful.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Okay. He had to make some adjustments. But here's the thing with
Star can't hear you, Bo. You're underwater.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Better.
Okay. Here's the thing, though. The thing about making adjustments is Rigo don't necessarily make adjustments. This is the way that he fights. If he's doing something, he has a way that he fights. Jab, jab, and it's not a jab to hurt you, just to find distance in case this is range. And then he uses his defense, which is his legs, where he throws his shoulder a half inch to make you move and counter. So he already knows what he's going up against. Lomachenko is going to have to make the adjustments because he's never been in a situation of a fight where some of the advantages he's used to doing can be countered. He's never been in a position, with the exception of the Orlando Salido fight, where a guy can actually force him to go backwards. And when he goes backwards, he didn't make the proper adjustments he needed until later in the fight. If it's not going his way early, he's going to be the one that's going to have to make the adjustments because Rigo already knows what he's going to do. And regardless of any disadvantage, he still employs his game plan. So I think Lomachenko is going to have to make more of an adjustment because Rigo has seen it all. Lomachenko is seeing this for the first time.
All right, gentlemen, let's compare some of the specs on these guys. We've already talked about weight a little bit, but any concerns, any issues, or any advantages to where they're coming at from their previous weight classes?
I would say that the weight is not really an issue here. However, it was really strange to see a rehydration limitation at 137. The whole thing with this limit is pointless because Lomachenko comes at a fight at 136, 135. He doesn't rehydrate that much. And what it tells me is that Team Rigo are thinking that because Lomachenko might be heavier, their punches are not going to play as much, because otherwise this whole limitation wouldn't be just an issue. And I think that Rigo is not making 130. He'll come around 127, maybe 128. I just don't think he packed that much weight in this time. And while Lomachenko has a height advantage, Rigo has a reach advantage, which, as Lomachenko showed in fighting with Walters, that reach advantage is not necessarily the best thing that counters Lomachenko because he's fighting really close, staying in the pocket. So I don't think that it's going to be the whole body aspect going to be a major player in this fight. I think it's going to be more strategy and thinking.
Well,
I agree it's going to be strategy and thinking, but here's the thing. You can't necessarily use Nicholas Walters for a guy with a reach advantage because Nicholas Walters did not employ his advantage in that fight as it pertains to Rigo. When he does employ his advantage, reach advantage can be a problem for Lomachenko because it's coming from a guy that uses every inch of that reach advantage. I don't think weight is going to be a problem because of this aspect. Number one, I'm not going to give either one of these guys, whether I like them or don't like them, an excuse.
as to discredit the victory from the other guy. So this is the fight Rigo asked for. He felt he could make it. I think he'll probably come in at 129 because he don't want to be too heavy, because he still wants to be able to be mobile and quick like he wants to be. And as far as the rehydration clause, the only thing I think I remember, Lomachenko once came in at 138. And I think that, in my opinion, that's just something to play with his mind, just something to give them something to think about after the weigh-in, to make sure that, hey, after the weigh-in, you guys still got to remember, you can't rehydrate to a certain weight amount just to bother them a little bit. I think it's a little bit of gamesmanship with that right there, but I don't think weight will be that big of a factor. I think Rigo is physically fit, and I think he has the ring intelligence to know what his body can and cannot do.
Well, before we get into that mental aspect, which I think is going to be the most interesting part of our debate, let's get into one other area where both of these men are known for extreme skill, which is going to be, I'm going to bundle this, several aspects together, which would be footwork, balance, ring generalship, the movement around the ring, the control around the ring, the balance, who's got the upper hand, and what should the fans be watching for? Eugene, why don't you take that first?
All right, so I have no questions about Loma's balance, simply because in fighting with Salido, he was being caught when he was pretty much out of balance, and he was able to recover without any fallovers. While with Rigo, we see time and time again from Amigasa flash right hand when he turned around, drop him right on the canvas, which seems looks to me like you can catch him off balance, and when it still counts as a knockdown, that goes to the scorecards, which 2 1 points for the fighter who scored the knockdown. So I'm thinking also that Lomachenko is making a lot of moves that are really deceiving, and not all of them are necessarily fake. Sometimes a setup for a real move. Sometimes they're just a scarecrow kind of thing, trying to throw in someone's face and make exactly different, completely different move.
Bo?
Yeah, that is the one area that I will say is Rigo can be caught in between his pivots. You go back to the Donaire fight, he got hit with a hook and both his feet were side by side, and that is of course a balance issue. You cannot hide that. But here's the thing though. When you as far as the other, and to me, I think this is going to come down to ring IQ and who can be the more technical fighter and employ their game plan. And I believe that's Rigo, simply because if you look at the people he has fought, they have tried to make him change that game plan. They have tried to employ their game plan, but Rigo always seems to stay on track with what he wants to do. He never gets off his game plan. He never gets distracted from what he needs to do, and he never gets baited into doing something that he doesn't want to do. And when it comes to feints, Rigo gives some of the best feints there is, because he does what's known as full body feints. He throw these feints like he's going to actually throw a left, and he's like kind of rehearsing the punches, and it kind of lures you into a false sense of security. Think, okay, his hands are not set, and the minute you try to come, boom, he catches you. So to me, this is going to come down to who is the more technical fighter and who has the higher ring IQ. And that's the one area I think Rigo has Lomachenko in. Lomachenko relies more on his athleticism and his pure ability, which Rigo can keep up with that athleticism step for step.
Got a question about the mental, fellas. Always talks about how this game is 90% mental. Connected to that is motivation in terms of just intangibles. There's been some trash talk from both sides coming into this fight. A little more from Lomachenko than I expected. This question is simple. It's a two-part question, excuse me. Who has the mental advantage coming into this fight, and who has the greater sense of motivation?
Well, I would say that Rigondeaux has everything to win and nothing to lose because everyone is counting him out. So he has the biggest motivation there is, you know. As for whether it plays on Lomachenko, I don't think so because ever we have never seen him throw in any sort of act that we would see in different fighters. Especially a recent one was Kovalev, where we saw that the guy stepping in the ring already lost. Um, what I think about his mental state overall is that there are differences about trash talk and whatever. There are differences in what he says and what he does, because what he says sometimes is really dismissive. So before this fight, Lomachenko was saying that he's gonna squash Rigondeaux like a tank and whatsoever. But at the same time, in no way when he was doing any unprofessional behavior inside the ring, he has never been shown that he's worried. So sometimes that comes even out of overconfidence, because Lomachenko is the guy who starts really slow in the ring, and within 4 rounds he has figured you out. And that is the answer to his fantastic amateur career, because he's a really quick thinker and he looks into people and understands how they react to what he does and what they do and try to do. So he can make a lot of trouble for a person because he understands the person pretty fast. He's a quick thinker.
Who has the most motivation? Of course, is Rigo, because the deck is stacked against him. The WBA is already saying that if he loses, he's going to take his title.
Oh, you're breaking up again.
I said the deck is already stacked. Rigo has the most motivation here because the deck is already stacked against him, because the WBA is saying if he loses, not only will they strip him of the title, they're going to put him out of the rankings. Then, of course, if he loses, you have a lot of guys that avoided him that will say, see, that's why we didn't want to fight him. They're justified in not fighting him. So he has the most motivation. Now, from the mental aspect, both of these guys are mentally tough. Even if you look at the Orlando Salido fight, even with what Orlando Salido was doing, Lomachenko did not once look to the referee for help or I don't want no more of this. Like, he never showed he was going to falter. He gritted it out and he grinded it out. So, and even with Rigo, you knock him down, he gets back up, and you don't see a look on his face like, oh snap, I'm about to lose. So both of these guys are extremely mentally focused. Rigo's always been a trash talker. For those that don't that don't speak Spanish, he did an interview where he was talking about Leo Santa Cruz, and he was trying to fight Leo Santa Cruz, and he said, "Yeah, I want that clucker in the ring with me. He's ducking me." And same thing when it came to Scott Quigg and Carl Frampton. So he's always kind of been a bit of a trash talker. Lomachenko, also at the same time, I don't look at what he's saying as trash talking. He's just a guy that's confident, and you're supposed to be. You're a champion. You got a guy coming in your division. You're not supposed to, make it seem like that you're not up for the challenge. So I think both guys are mentally tough, mentally prepared, but I think Rigo is the one that has the most to lose here.
Another aspect here, we're talking about the fighters and what they bring to the ring. Another fact that we can't leave out here, the corner, specifically the trainer. You hear a lot of these stories about Lomachenko's trainer, and he brings these kind of, for lack of a better word, innovative things to the ring, innovative things to how Lomachenko prepares for the fight. You don't hear as much about Rigo's team, but there has to be something there because, let's face it, Rigo just didn't just come out the womb fighting the way he fights. He had to be taught. He had to learn it from someone. He had to implement what was given to him. So we talked about the physical. We talked about which fighter has the greatest incentive here. Let's focus here on the corner of both Lomachenko and Rigondeaux. Who do you think has the advantage?
I would give it to Bo because there is not really much of what I can say about Anatoly Lomachenko. So I would give it to Bo and then just add whatever is left to say about Lomachenko.
Here's the thing. Rigo first started out. He started out with Ronnie Shields. I don't think a lot of people recognize this. Then he went to Pedro Diaz at Mundo Boxing Gym. And the reason why that was a great move for him, because Pedro Diaz, remember Rigo from the Cuban amateur days. He was a guy he was comfortable with. He was a guy who could advance his skills as far as the technical aspect of Cuban boxing. And some of the regiments and things that they're doing, like he throws the ball up in the air, have Rigo catch it. He throws balls up in the air, have Rigo catch it and toss it to him. And he's doing them in different directions and different angles. And what that does is it work on hand-eye coordination as long as foot speed. Most Cuban fighters who are technically sound have faster feet than their hands. Why? Because they want to be able to get in and get out, get in and get out. So they have to have faster feet. So some of the exercise they have them doing with the string, the stick, throwing the stick at you, and while you're punching and countering, coming in, and things of that nature, those are good skills as far as enhancing your hand-eye coordination, enhancing your footwork. So, and also, running on the sand, doing the run, touch, circle stuff. It helps with your endurance. So, I think he's with the trainer and Pedro Diaz that understand what he needs and how he's going to have to be to win this fight. And on the other side, you got you got Papachenko, Lomachenko's dad. And as history has shown us, when you have a combination with father and son, nobody knows a fighter like the father. The father knows his fighter. He knows his dad can take. And this is also somebody that was in his career all through his amateur career as well. So I don't really think there's going to be a big, huge advantage in the ring, because both these guys are intelligent. Both these guys do their homework, but both these guys have techniques that help their fighters. And I just want to point out that, the reason why my opponent, Eugene, passed it to me, because of Ken. Again, I'm the Bwtm Undisputed King, and I would know stuff like this.
All right. So the thing about whatever is available about Lomachenko is that he's not a natural southpaw. He was thought to be one. Basically, his father retailed him from an orthodox fighter to a southpaw at the age of 6, 7. And he practices different kind of exercises connecting his hands to his mind, memorizing different numbers on the wall and then repeating it on the other reshuffled number poster, where he needs to reach for the numbers in needed sequence. He uses a lot of training for feet as a ladder one, when he builds kind of a ladder on the ground. And a lot of that came from another Anatoly Lomachenko's project, where Anatoly Lomachenko asked both Usyk and Lomachenko to take courses of dancing, which is Ukrainian folk dance, requires a lot on movement and balancing on feet, because it's really dynamic. Not river dance though. It has a lot more movement in there. So it turned out that he was able to build footwork for not only his own son, but also a guy who is much larger, that has a phenomenal footwork for his weight. Any other types of practicing is disputable, because some say that they're important, some say they're just for show off. Again, we know that a lot of things that is shown on open trainings are not showing us what the fighter is gonna do and whether this thing is actually has anything to do with what he's gonna be doing in the ring and what his stack is gonna be like.
Any other response, Bo?
I understand Lomachenko dance, but if you have never done a Cuban dance or a Cuban salsa or merengue, baby, that is footwork for your behind.
Okay. I want to focus on a specific aspect of the game here. Defense. Loma is known for his defense, but defense is what helps make Rigo the fighter that he is. From a defensive aspect, who do you think is superior? Eugene?
Okay, so I can't really say that Loma is superior. I think his defense is on level, but again, he has never faced an opponent that would make his defense look weak. I would more say that in Salido he faced a guy who used a little bit more than was needed. You know, tried to dig an extra inch. But with all his upper body movement and his overall positioning in the ring that happens constantly, you will rarely see him standing in one spot. I think that it's really hard to say whether any defense of any of the guys is superior, because it's applied in a different style. When Lomachenko is being more aggressive, Rigondeaux being more defensive, but at the same time, Rigondeaux has shown vulnerability with his defensive style.
Okay, Lomachenko has shown some vulnerability in his defensive style. I revert to the Marriaga fight. Marriaga was able to land some very good overhand, some straight right hands, and some overhand rights on Lomachenko. All of those shots that Orlando Salido was able to throw, they wasn't all low. Some of those body shots were exactly landing. The thing about Lomachenko is most of his defense relies on pressuring you, keeping your hands at bay while he gets off his offense. He has a set number of combination punches he likes to throw, and then he moves left and he moves right based off of what punch he throws last or what punch he think might come back at him. Rigo defense, if you look at the level of competition he has fought, his defense has always been superb. Even if he's at a height disadvantage or read disadvantage, his defense has still been able to get guys off balance, stay in the pocket, dodge punches, and counter. I think one guy's defense come from him being aggressive, like Lomachenko, and I will give him credit for this. For an aggressive fighter, he has defense on his mind while being aggressive. But Rigo is kind of like a defensive fighter who uses his defense to catch you with counters or lull you to sleep or catch you with certain types of punches to keep you in front of him, so he's never at a disadvantage from an angle standpoint. But I think it's hard to say who has an advantage in this, because this will be the biggest defensive test for either one of these guys, because this will be the most highest skill level fighter either one of these guys have ever faced.
First of all, I want to send a little bit of apologies here. Gail is dealing with an issue in her home area. She may be dealing with a possible earthquake where she resides. So she's hopping in, hopping back on, and she can't really hear us. So she may have to do some technical things on her end and reboot her system in order to jump on and stay on. I apologize for that. You mentioned both competition in your description of when talking about who has the better defense. Since I hopped on late, I'm gonna ask this question. It may have been answered already, but compare the competition level of both fighters. Who has faced the greater competition? Who do you think, and based on that, who do you think will have the advantage as a result?
Who has faced the better competition, of course, is Rigondeaux. And here's the reason why. I'll say it again. He fought an undefeated champion, Enrico Ramos, something that Lomachenko has never done. He's never faced an undefeated champion. Rico Ramos also at that time was blowing through people. Then he faced former champion and number 5 ranked Cordoba. He faced number 10 ranked Jamie Cassie. Then he faced Tian Kennedy, Robert Moroccan, and then of course Nonito Donaire, who was the number 3 pound for pound guy who was blowing through everybody in that division. And Rigo was the underdog in that fight. He was an underdog. I don't even recall if Lomachenko was ever an underdog in any fight. He may have been, I don't know. But if he was never an underdog facing someone the caliber of a Nonito Donaire. So if I look at Rico Ramos, if I look at number 3 ranked Tian Kennedy, if I look at former champion Cordoba, former champion Ibeco, and then the disparities in height and reach, I would have to say Rigo has faced the better competition. If you say that Gary Russell, but Gary Russell hadn't faced no one up until the point that he fought Lomachenko. Matter of fact, Lomachenko was going to be his biggest test to date, and that was for a vacant title. Rocky Martinez had already lost to high level fighters. He already had losses to like guys like Mikey Garcia. I'm not quite sure if Orlando Salido beat him or not, but I know Mikey Garcia did beat him, so he already had some losses. So we've seen him lose to elite level guys. Nicholas Walters claimed that Fang was beating a Donaire that Rigo had already demolished. He had a draw against Jason Sosa, but he was also out for a year. So he wasn't the sharpest of the sharpest he could have been. And then Jason Sosa struggled against Javier Fortuna. He was losing that fight till he knocked him out. And Steve Smith was giving him a go, was actually making a comeback in that fight. So if I look at level of competition, Rigo has definitely faced the highest level of competition, but I do want to add this. Since the Orlando Salido fights and the Gary Russell win, you have seen significant improvements in Lomachenko that I think that if you're anybody who watch boxing, that you know that definitely is something that Rigo's going to have to deal with. But at the same time, one of the key factors for me is ring IQ, and I just don't think Lomachenko has faced the type of competition that has made him have to think about what he wants to do, make adjustments, and make him uncomfortable like Rigo can possibly very well much do.
Eugene?
All right, so as the level of opposition, I would say that it's still debatable because whether Walters was out of the ring or not, it's never on Lomachenko. So, and not to say that anyone can take that win off him. What I would say is that his loss to Salido, it gave him more than, I would say, 10 fights against Nikos Walters or Roman Martinez would do. And that is something that that makes you think about Lomachenko in a different prospect, that he's never been dictated what he can do in the ring from that point on. Because once he started making adjustments, it was Lomachenko who, it was Orlando Salido who was holding Lomachenko, because from the way it looked in the last rounds, it seemed like Salido was going down, but he stood. Okay, Lomachenko didn't claim his win, and he went to the drawing board. And from that moment, we can see that his fighting style was more refined, I would say.
Okay, I see Gail is back. Give a quick update on what went down. I asked about the mental aspect for both fighters, who has the advantage. I asked about the corner of each fighter. Who do you think have the greater corner work? And I just asked about the level of competition. And based on that, who do you see? Who each guy thinks has the advantage? Any other questions, Gail?
I'd like a follow-up to that, and this is just a one-name answer from both of you gentlemen. Who would you say is your favorites, toughest opponent to date? So who was Lomachenko's toughest opponent to date, professional, and Rigo's toughest opponent to date, professional? Now, actually, let's make that professional or amateur. Toughest opponent to date, name them.
Bob.
Toughest opponent to date for Lomachenko, of course, is going to be Orlando Salido, because that's the guy he took a loss to. Toughest opponent to date for Rigondeaux is, if you watch that fight, is Ricardo Cordoba, because Ricardo Cordoba was giving Rigo a very hard fight. And you can also go with Amagaja, because Amagaja also knocked him down twice, and Rigo probably had to make more adjustments in that fight than any other fight he had. So Ricardo Cordoba and Amagaja, and for Lomachenko, I most definitely would have to go with Orlando Salido.
And Eugene? Eugene, you with us? Toughest opponents today.
Yeah, so Orlando Salido, and I would say that that Salido fight was more of a revelation for Lomachenko, because there were a lot of tricks that Orlando Salido taught, I would say, Lomachenko. You know, he kind of exposed him to what professional boxing may be full of, and that was a lot of food to process to Lomachenko. Not in the meaning that he was not able to process, but just it was wait, can you do that moment for him? But then again, the way we see him fight in amateurs, he got one loss against Selimov, and avenged it twice, which means that he pretty much figured out the guy. And the only knockdown ever scored on Lomachenko was in amateurs in 2007, which I tried to find the footage of, or at least the name of the guy, but was unable to. So other than just mark of knockdown, we cannot say anything.
Lost to history. Ingram, I understand you've got a question of your own.
I've got a two-pronged question for both guys. Question number one is, how is the other guy's fighter perceived by the media and by themselves? For example, there are stories that are saying that Rigondeaux's old, he's too small, he's chinny, and for Lomachenko, well, he hasn't fought the best fighters out there yet, and he could be a bit of a hype job. So, Bo, what's your perception, or you think the perception Rigondeaux would have of Lomachenko? And Eugene, what do you think Lomachenko's perception is of Rigondeaux? So, Bo, you go first.
Okay, let me just clear one thing up. I hate the word hype job, only because of this. You don't win 2 titles in 2 separate weight divisions being a hype job. You still, at the end of the day, got to beat who is put in front of you. So I don't particularly care for that. Whether I like a fighter or not, I don't like that. I don't like that, because you got to recognize the fighter's accomplishment, okay? So let me just clear that up. So anybody saying that is, you shouldn't be a part of boxing if you're going to say that.
I have to say, when I do say this, I'm setting this up as to with the following question following up with. So I'll clear that up when you answer the first question.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. For people who say Rigo is too old, here's the thing about Cuban fighters: they're like fine wine, man. They get better with age, and they don't have a lot of wear and tear on them. And that's the thing; like they don't have that wear and tear that most professionals have at the age that they are. I haven't seen any diminish in Rigo's skills. Even if you look at the Moses Flores fight, you still saw a guy whose footwork was impeccable. You still saw a guy whose timing was impeccable. whose ring IQ was impeccable. And he uses his ring IQ to where if his speed is a second off, he has enough ring IQ to offset that. So I can't look at age and say that plays a factor because he hasn't shown the resemblance. Like when Pacquiao fought Jeff Horn, I think it was the 9th round or 10th round, whatever round he had Jeff Horn hurt. Manny Pacquiao would have finished Jeff Horn. This Manny Pacquiao couldn't pull the trigger and do it. Right? That's not the case with Rigondeaux. And what was the other part you said now? Oh, about the hype job. Is that what it was?
Lomachenko, the perception that people would have about Lomachenko, and how Rigondeaux would see Lomachenko, whether it be a hype job, a guy that's had an easy touch, or what are the thoughts you think that could be perceived before the fight? Because we all know what the excuses can be after the fight, so we're trying to preempt that.
I think when you hear people say hype job, it's people who number one, get in their feelings about how a guy is being pushed. That's number one. And how the media perceives this guy. And a lot of people feel like, well, he just hasn't done enough for you to tell me he's a number one pound for pound. Like they see people putting him as number one pound for pound and things of that nature. Now, that's not the fighter's fault. And people look at that and say, well, how can you make him number one pound for pound when you look at the accomplishments of some of the other fighters like Crawford and Andre Ward? So people tend to say, no, that's a hype job. Okay. But that's someone else's opinion. That's not the fighter's fault. So he shouldn't be labeled as a hype job. And I think Rigo sees Lomachenko as a worthy adversary, hence why he's seeking this fight for him. And he made that very, very clear. Rigo is not looking at Lomachenko as a hype job because, again, you do not have 395 amateur fights with one loss. You do not win 2 gold medals. You do not win a world championship in your 3rd professional fight being a damn hype job. And I think Rigo knows that. He knows what he's in for. And I think Lomachenko doesn't perceive Rigo as being old because, again, he knows what Rigo can do. And the things I named about him being diminished and all of that, he knows, nope, Rigo is not diminished. Rigo's skills is still there. And I just want to say one more thing and I'll pass it out. People need to be careful about downgrading another fighter because what happens is when the fighter who you don't like wins, then you don't want to give him that credit, saying, oh, well, no. These are grown men. If they choose to get in that ring, you give the other fighter credit because at the end of the day, they can choose not to fight. Rigo sought out this fight. He was okay with the weight. Lomachenko agreed to the rehydration. There are no excuses.
Beautifully said. Eugene.
What I would say is that the way people perceive fighters and the way fighters perceive each other is completely different aspect because I don't believe Lomachenko has any illusions about who Rigondeaux is, and despite his bold comments about squashing Rigondeaux, I don't think he, not that he doesn't mean it, more like he doesn't overlook Rigondeaux because at the end of the day, he must have a thought in his mind that Rigondeaux looked at Lomachenko and said, even jumping 2 divisions up, I can fight this guy and win. So I don't think Lomachenko is going to dismiss it. He has never shown any irresponsibility in preparation to his fights and to his opponents. And I think a lot of people who online are talking about Rigondeaux being a really good fighter on one hand, and then, well, he's old and moving 2 divisions up, and what's so bloody ever. So nah, I would say that they're making a disservice to themselves because after all, Rigondeaux took that decision for some apparent reason, and I don't think that he's just trying to have a money grab. I really do think that he saw something that he might try to capitalize on.
Okay, and the final question to add to what I asked you both is that should your man win, Rigondeaux or Lomachenko, where does this place him in terms of legacy? Does that person become pound for pound #1 in the world? Does that person say, well, is the victory a hollow victory because Rigondeaux is not in his best weight category? How is each person's career mapped out after this fight in terms of legacy? And I'll throw it to Eugene first.
So the way I see it is that Lomachenko has absolutely no excuse in the view of, let's call them casuals, right? Because those who learn about boxing more in depth, they see that they see the options that can happen. But the casuals has set up him for such a high standard without really being in a fight that would make Lomachenko go basically life and death with his opponent. Even with Salido, he wasn't going down. It was just a lot of uncomfortable things that he had to learn. And as for Rigondeaux, I think he's damned if he wins and he's damned if he loses, because if he wins, nobody's going to fight him. Nobody at 126, not at 130, not at 122. He's pretty much done for, I don't know, what his next move would be. As for Lomachenko, he will win. If he wins, then people will say, what do you expect? It's a smaller guy. Try something new.
Okay, thank you for that. Bo?
I think your English is a little off because you said if. When, W-H-E-N, capital, bold, black letters. Cuban, English, cuando, whenever. Rigo win. You on time out, bro. The king is talking. When Rigo wins, how he will be perceived in history, it's a conundrum. This is the reason being is because even though he beat Lomachenko, there were still fighters out there that he didn't get, be it whatever that he wanted to fight him. So there will still be missing names on his resume that I think could actually hurt him, because people will also perceive how Nonito Donaire turned out after Rigo beat him to try to take away that victory from Donaire. If he could have got the Scott Quigg, the Carl Framptons, and the Leo Santa Cruz, I think that would have been better for him. So I think that it's going to be based on how people perceive him as the fighter and his overall body of work. Like, and I do agree with Eugene in this aspect of if Rigo, when Rigo wins, nobody at 126, 130 is not going to fight him, because the guys at 130 they didn't want to fight Lomachenko. Floyd didn't want to risk Gervonta Davis against Lomachenko. You bet your ass he's not going to risk him against Rigo. So the only guy I think that would probably fight either one of these dudes at 130 is Tevin Farmer, and probably Burchell. That's probably about it. But and then on top of that, at this point, I think for Rigo it would be a matter of what's left for me to prove, because he really feels that Lomachenko is the best guy out there in boxing. So that's for him. Now for Lomachenko, he can still go on and add to his legacy and build, because even if he loses to Rigo, when he loses to Rigo, he can get that off his record. Hence why, just like the loss of Lionel Salido, he beats Gary Russell, he fights Nicholas Walsh, he fights Jason Stosen. People pretty much have forgotten about that. So I think if Lomachenko goes on, and let's say he becomes the undisputed champion at 135, okay, people will say, okay, well, you lost to Rigo, especially if it's like a controversial win, but you lost to Rigo, so okay, but you still went on to beat other good fighters. You still went on to beat other, probably, like he fights Bert Shelton, he dogs walks him, and he becomes undisputed at 135, or he wins the belt at 140. Now you've won 3 belts in 3 different weight divisions. So for Lomachenko, I think the perception of him can be a little bit better, when he loses, as it is for Rigo. So I think for Rigo, it's a matter of perception to me. It's just how you perceive these guys, and that's where people will place them, and that's where this will go to a legacy. But I think overall, this fight itself, these guys fighting together, already has made a legacy statement to me, because of their accomplishments, because they're gold medalists, and because of who they are, not just as fighter, but as individuals.
So which man suffers more with a loss, Rigo or Loma? Who does it hurt more?
Rigo. It definitely hurts Rigo. It definitely hurts him because
not really.
once he loses, he's bounced out of boxing. 122. WBA has already said they're going to take him off his belt. They're going to remove him out of the standards. Also, all those guys that didn't fight him at 122 and 126 is going to continue to use this for a reason not to fight him because he lost. And we've already seen that Lomachenko can take a loss and still continue to go on to have a promising career. So, in my opinion, it's Rigo.
Eugene?
I don't think Rigo has anything to lose in here because he at the point of his career when a lot of people consider him irrelevant because he couldn't gain much traction, and if it's a big if he's successful, he will be looked at as a no-go because obviously if he can take a challenge of moving to 130 and scoring a win over the guy who is supposed to be the biggest 130 pounder there is skill-wise, then he will be avoided. And if he loses, it will be used as a reason why he would be avoided. So there is no win for him here, and it's only loss for him. As for Lomachenko, his win will be keeping whatever he's got so far, and his loss will be to lose to a guy again who went against all odds. Obviously not empirical odds, but odds in terms of the general perception of the guy. So many people overlook Rigondeaux and think he won't win, and if somehow by magic that happens, then Lomachenko is going to be quite ruined in the way people, in their mass see him.
We're going to launch one last question, and then we're going to ask both of you for some closing remarks, and then we're going to let our judges, Ingram and Michael, weigh in. So for the final question, this is more of an overview question on behalf of boxing for both of you. These are both acknowledged technically brilliant fighters, both with tremendous tools, not the one-punch knockout sort of guys, not perhaps the raw, flashy, brawler type fighters. Is there a chance that this fight is so technical that the vast audience watching, and especially, of course, with my focus in the United States, watching on what is a free network for them this weekend, is there any chance that people watch this and say, oh my Lord, that was a boring fight?
I would say that it shouldn't be because of the style of at least one fighter, who's not sleeping in the ring. I would say that I actually see a few knockdowns being scored in the ring. That's why this attire will be really handy to Rigondeaux. I want him to feel really comfortable on that canvas. Ukrainians are nice people. We treat our opponents with respect. I have a little thing here every time for Bo when he says that when Rigo wins, that's a little thing I put on my ears.
Oh yeah!
I just
damn.
do a little this, and I say, no nonsense.
Gosh.
Oh.
Overall, yeah. Few knockdowns, unanimous decision. Loma keeps going.
All right, Bo, the floor is yours. The gauntlet is thrown.
The gauntlet has definitely been thrown. And I have no problem with that gauntlet because what we have to understand is when Rigo beats Lomachenko, we would say those words that we normally say when a fighter who we love and a fighter who we perceive and a fighter who means everything to us. What we're going to see is that he will be nothing more than a memory to us, Lomachenko, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. You came over to this country and tried as you may, but you couldn't beat Rigondeaux on any given and your best damn day. You will fall to the ground and it will be so sweet. And when you look up and you see the King Rigo sitting, you must bend down and kiss his feet. When you realize that it is done and your sad song has been sung, you will sink to the bottom of the ocean because that's where you have hung your last rung. And when it's all over and you have nothing more to sum and you have nothing more to grab and you have nothing more but your larum, then you can go home, ask Bob Arams, and bend him over and kiss his butt and hope that he gives you a new contract so you can see what was up. So Rigo is going to beat this guy. Bottom line, there's no questions about it. And the fact that my opponent have to rely on style points, that tells me he has some doubt about it. The fact that he had to imitate the Bwtm undisputed champ says everything you need to know. But just remember something about when a person wants to talk as if he is a dump, he is really nothing more but a fake imitation and a chump. So, ladies and gentlemen, pay attention, pay close, because when Rigo beats Lomachenko, your bank account will be broke.
Excellent clapbacks.
Yeah, I think the gallery is standing up cheering. Both of these participants, we can only hope that when this fight, if this fight, as both predicted, goes to the judges, that we have just as much entertainment to look at as we have tonight. So we go to the judges. Ingram, Michael, we weigh in. If you need a tiebreaker, here I am, but I'm going to leave it to you two.
Mike, both guys I think have been quite articulate. So we can debate this between ourselves and then we can come up with... you tell me your thoughts so far of Bo and Eugene. I think they've been both articulate. Yourself?
Excellent debate. Excellent points have been made. I respect what both guys had to say. The only pushback is when it comes to the question, what could be gained based on who won? And Eugene basically implied that Rigondeaux, I agree with him when he says that if Rigondeaux loses, he's going to be totally blocked out. But he also implied that even if he wins, he would have nothing to gain. I disagree. If Loma loses, it would hurt. But here's the thing. He's still under the Bob Arum umbrella. Because of that, he will lose, but he will still have something there to protect him. When it comes to Rigondeaux, you could say he may be blacked out from 122 to 130, but here's the thing. If he wins, he will have beat the guy who a lot of people consider pound for pound #1, namely casuals like Teddy Atlas. Well, he's not a casual, but maybe mainstream outlets like Teddy Atlas, like
HBO, HBO,
and Atlas. Excuse me, HBO and Atlas.
Kellerman in particular.
So you cannot take that away from him. He will have beaten the perceived baddest man on the block, and it really wouldn't matter if at a certain point whether they would try to block him out. He would have the win. He would have that win. And so whatever the powers that be would try to do to him, he would still have that win and he will still hold it over everybody. He could say, listen, you say I don't want to, I was afraid to move up. I was afraid to do this. the WBA, whoever, did all that to me, and look what I have done. Drop the mic. That alone gives him the motivation. That alone gives him the incentive. That alone would mean something there. So that's the only pushback that I would have within this debate.
Okay. In terms of both guys making points, they both have made very, very good, valid points. Very good, valid points. The ending, I would like to have had a little bit more at the end, because I think things were heating up there between Eugene and Bo. Eugene started first and Bo came back. But I think I don't want to make a decision on this personally. And I think it's right that I do make a decision. It's because obviously I've got one guy who's in the race on the BWTM, so it's not fair that I make a decision. However, what I will say is that I think both men have been a credit to the sport. I think both men have been a credit to boxing in the sense that they've both been very articulate. While there's been that, they've had a little banter between one another, it's not been disrespectful. Nobody shouted at one another. Gail's done a fantastic job tonight, as well as yourself, Michael. And I think everyone in this room needs to give themselves a great pat on the back for what they've done tonight. And people that are listening tonight should really look at this and say, well, this is the way debate should be had and should happen more often. So that's my thoughts on it altogether. The only thing I have on this fight that I'm concerned about is, for Rigondeaux's sake, I think that I said it in a video earlier, Lomachenko can win this fight in points and he can win this fight in knockout. I'm not so sure if Rigondeaux gets the points and he does outbox Lomachenko, he's going to be able to win this fight on points. I just don't see it happening on points. See, I believe he's going to have to knock Lomachenko out. That's my thoughts. So I'll leave it as that.
One more thing from me. I asked a question about adjustments. Here, and the reason I asked that, because when Loma fought Salido, the adjustment he had to make was due to the physicality and the roughhouse tactics of Salido in that first fight. The question looms, we still do not know how will Loma adjust when he's in there in the ring with a guy on his level in terms of skill, connected to the mental. We don't know how he would react mentally to a guy, given what Rigondeaux could bring to the table. That's why I asked those two questions specifically, because that's the unknown factor. Will he mentally break down? Will he mentally cave in? Can he really adjust? Is his corner adept enough to discuss? Because Bro brought this point out, Lomachenko, he has had such an advantage, even minus outside of that Salido fight, he has had such an advantage that he's only had to do so much. He could fight one level, and that's been it. So we just do not know how will he adjust from a skills aspect and from a mental aspect when he do what he normally does, and Rigo can counter it and hit him and frustrate him. So that's specifically why I was asking those questions. We just don't know. That's the unknown factor here. While with Rigo, we've seen it. He's seen just about everything in there. Loma hasn't.
But I will throw this out there just as in terms of I can only go back to his amateur career. Lomachenko, he's had a lot more fights than Rigondeaux from on paper, what we've seen as an amateur. And obviously, at some point in those amateur bouts, he's had to make adjustments, and he seems to have made those adjustments.
But the point is, this is professional. What about when it gets to round 6, round 8, round 10, and he still hasn't figured this guy out? What is he going to do?
That's a valid point. That's a valid point. We don't know. And Rigondeaux has fought the better in my opinion. I think he's fought the better opposition. So up to this point, but will that matter come fight night? I mean, experience is great, but if you're climbing off the canvas and getting stopped, that experience is something that's not really going to count for anything, is it?
Fair enough.
What I wanted to correct for a moment is that Mike was mentioning me saying that Rigondeaux doesn't have anything to win. I wasn't talking about his legacy. I was talking about his next move. You know, Rigondeaux will get a card, like the best hand he can play, and nobody's gonna play him. You know, that was my implication. As his legacy, he will claim a lot, but as for practicality of that claim, I'm really doubtful.
Dare we say it? Dare we say that we've come down to a draw? Do we have another big competition this year in boxing come to a draw, or at least a point of repose until we have a fight on Saturday? I think we might be there.
This is a tough one to call, a really tough one to call.
Mike,
it is a tough one to call.
Do you think Lomachenko could have beaten the opponents of Rigondeaux beat? And do you think Rigondeaux could have beaten the opponents of Lomachenko for?
Yes and yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Do you think that Lomachenko would have beaten Donaire the night that Rigondeaux beat him?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a pause when you said that. Yeah.
I don't know if he could have been as dominant, but would he have beat him? Yeah.
Rigondeaux versus Nicholas Walters.
Yeah.
That version of Walters, absolutely.
Yeah, that version of Walters, no doubt about it.
Yeah. The version of Walters that beat Donaire, no.
So the version that beat Donaire, you don't think Rigondeaux could beat him?
No, because that's a styles make fights issues. And Walters was, and I was ringside for that fight. Walters was so able to pressure and cut off the ring. It was an astonishing performance.
Do you think Lomachenko could have beat that version of Nicholas Walters as easily as he did?
That's what I'm asking.
No.
Oh, Loma, no. That would have been that would have been a battle to the death. And of course, that's what we all hoped to see and didn't get.
No, absolutely not.
Do you think that Lomachenko hits harder than anybody that Rigondeaux's faced before, and vice versa?
No, I don't.
Mike?
From a sheer power standpoint, no, that's not Lomachenko's strength.
No.
Okay.
He can punch, but he's not a power punching operator.
Say what you want about Donaire. He can crack, particularly with that left hook. Yeah. I do not see Lomachenko with one punch in particular hitting as hard as Donaire can with the left hook.
Yeah, but Lomachenko right now at this position of his professional career, and let's remember how early it still is, everybody. He's a war of attrition fighter. If he's going to stop somebody, it's by attrition. It's by volume. It's not by a one punch, lights out stoppage.
If he had true power, he wouldn't let some of these guys go rounds. He would have taken his. He would be dominant, but he would take these guys out sooner than he does.
Yeah. Well, and it's my impression that Lomachenko has what is required to be a truly great fighter, which is a little bit of a mean streak, which means he likes to torture him. He likes to torture him a little bit like a cat likes to torture a bit of prey. It's fun. He likes to see him hurt. And punchers don't care about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think watching him fight Mariaga, he could have ended his misery far earlier than he did, but he was enjoying himself. And he knew the crowd was too. So I think sometimes showmanship is bad for a fighter, but sometimes it's an asset given their other skill set. In Lomachenko's case, adding the showmanship has been very good for him.
It has. So where are we going, people? Michael? Gail?
You know, when all things are even And as we've seen quite a bit this year, I often feel in a fairly even fight, youth is served. And youth in this case is represented by Lomachenko. It's very hard for me if somebody handed me money to bet that I would find it difficult, if not impossible, to bet against Lomachenko.
Okay, Mike. On paper, Loma being the perceived bigger guy and younger guy should win. However, if karma has anything to do with it, given all the mess that Rigo has had to deal with in his career, from promoters, from the sanctioning bodies, from the networks, given the motivation, given Bo's point about he's not really shot warranted, however old he is, the skills are still there, the speed is still there, the athleticism is still there. I don't care if he's smaller. Putting all those components into it, karma says that Rigo is old one, for lack of a better word. He's old one, given all the mess he's had to deal with. He will find a way. He will be highly motivated. And again, as I keep saying, Loma hasn't dealt with this guy and the skill set. I don't care if he is smaller. I don't care if he is older. Loma's going to have some problems. So that alone, my head says Loma, but something in me says that at the very least, Rigo's going to give this guy hell and may pull out a win, and we may see a rematch.
I think whatever happens, Rigo is going to be a puzzle to Lomachenko, at least for the first few rounds. I think Loma's going to take 2, 3, perhaps even 4 rounds to really figure Loma out. Does the tide turn in that 4th, 5th, 6th round? That's when we know who's going to win the fight, in my opinion.
Will either fighter be able to make the sort of mistakes they may have been able to make before against lesser opponents? That's the question.
Ah, that is a very good point, because there's going to be no margin for error in this fight. They're both far too smart.
And if Rigondeaux's carried his power up, and Rigondeaux is the power puncher in the fight, and he can hurt Lomachenko early, what sort of fight do we have then?
Loma's in trouble. He's in trouble. He's in trouble if Rigo's able to carry his power up from 22, because there are going to be opportunities where he's going to hit Loma. We don't know anything about Loma's chin, but if Rigo has some pop at that division, up at 130 or wherever he weighs in, because I think he's going to be able to hit Loma more than Loma's used to being hit, he's in trouble.
People say, Sean Newton says, Walters is a huge puncher. How did that work out? Ross is a hard puncher. But Walters and Russell are not accurate like Rigondeaux. It's different type of punches. They're big punches, but they're not accurate in the same way like Rigondeaux is. Plus,
and Walters
as well.
And let's be clear, Walters, watch that fight. Walters never got off in that fight at all. He never got off. Why? Because he was not sharp. Not the Walters that's on there.
There we go. There we go. So, what's going to be the result? How are we going to judge this? My personal opinion, it's a draw for me. But, Michael?
Too close to call for me, to be completely honest. 2 points too close to call. Both of these guys made excellent points. The way that Bo responded at the end, because he had to.
Showing once again, when talented combatants of equal skill come together, they push each other to the best. And I think we've got a triple scorecard, 114-114 draw here, my friend. I think we do. And I think we will have to have a rematch if they end up having a rematch. And no matter where it goes, we got to have a rematch.
Absolutely. I would ask that, if possible, at the end of the fight, at the end of Rigondeaux Lomachenko, if it's possible, that everyone could re-meet here at the end, even if it's for 15 minutes, to hear what Bo's got to say and what Eugene have got to say. It'll be interesting to see if one guy's fighter gets starched, what the other guy's got to say about it.
Well,
I'm in.
Okay, well, as still the BWTM Undisputed Champion, I'm obligated to come on and defend my crown, whether it is in victory or in defeat. So I'm a man of my word at that. And being from America, that's how we do things over here.
And you stay in America, and you stay in America as well.
and let it be noted for the record around the world that as your moderator was sitting here 45 minutes ago, we had an earthquake. What does that mean? I'm not sure. But that's damn freaky, everybody. Damn freaky.
Well, actually, I know what it means, Gil. It means you're backing the wrong horse because you're going with Lomo. So there was an earthquake.
Well, we're all in for something big to end our boxing year, and I, for one, can't wait.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I just want to say one thing, and that is to Eugene. I definitely appreciate him being here. I definitely appreciate what he brought. The hat needs to be a little bit more tilted up at the brim, Cuban style, but you know what I'm saying? You had the Rat Pack thing going, and I thought that was kind of cool.
I would like to say something, but my cats woke up and they're bugging the shit out of me.
And funny you should say, I have two dogs, which happen to be boxers, both, who think that it's time for us all to shut the hell up and call it a day.
Exactly, because I gotta prepare for my show in about 30 minutes.
Oh, that's right. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure. Shall we sign off? Ingram, I leave the final word to you.
Gail, Eugene, Bo, Mike, thank you all so much for being a part of the great debate. We've got to do it again soon. Thank you all so much. And thank you who've been watching diligently for the last hour or so. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Good morning.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Afternoon.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Eugene.
All right.